Hello, everyone. Wanted to go over the week or module 4 study questions. These are obviously matters of interpretation. We're dealing with dramatic scenes from film, so I can't say that there are right and wrong answers, but I wanted to comment on it just to make sure that you had a notion of what I had in mind. Uh, the important thing here is to see the contrast, I think, between the different scenes, the different ways that these filmmakers have imagined, in this case, a man's death, and how that death goes. I hope that I haven't played my hand too much about the first scene, the one from the Barbarian Invasions, which is quite a good film, French Canadian film. I can't say that the view of death or the view of dying or the way this man's death is depicted is my favorite, but it's certainly, I mean, it's a good, clear notion of how a death may go. I mean, certainly a death may go like this. I mean, again, if we put aside the fact that he is actually committing suicide, that it's an assisted suicide scene, everything else about it is quite loving, and this man sort of goes out of life in this perfectly kind of beautiful way, reconciled with all his old friends and lovers and children. And I don't know, maybe it's on the edge of being a little hokey, perhaps is my, but it presents this amazingly positive, loving view of how someone might die, and I couldn't help but contrast it in my mind with the what is essentially the death scene from Magnolia, the Jason Robards character in Magnolia. Um, in the Barbarian Invasions, everything is tied up. All the emotional loose ends, all the relationships of this man's life are resolved and affirmed, and he goes off to death in this sort of effortless, loving way. Whereas the death scene from Magnolia is, I can't imagine anything more different. That is, that death is not an event that your life culminates in, where everything is tied up and all of your important relationships and issues in your life are resolved in this loving way. It's rather this man more or less dying alone with this stranger there who certainly feels for him but doesn't know him, listening to him go on a long speech about what a horrible life he's lived and what a horrible person he's been. I can't say that the one way is more truthful than another, but there's something of tremendous emotional impact, probably in both of them. It's just that the second one, to me, is so devastating. That is, that dying is in no way a kind of there's no resolution and there's no solace. This man dies and is very truthful about what a terrible man he's actually been, and that and death in no way is a kind of a solace. Finally, the view of death in all that jazz is just crazy, right? But it's a way that a show business person imagines how they would like to go out. Um, it's humorous and silly, and but there's a kind of a desperation there on the part of the dying man as he fantasizes this big theatrical TV special, sending him on his way. It gives it a certain edge. And I think that is another way, like the first scene from the Barbarian Invasions is the way we imagine perhaps how we would like to go out. The second version is how some people do go out because of the way that they've lived, if they're honest about the way they've lived. And the third one is imagining our going out with a bang, going out in this theatrical way where you pull out all the stops and sort of celebrate your existence. But it's very ambivalent, and I mean, it is what it is. But it's certainly worth watching to the end, which is the end of the film, when after all this big of fantasy about going about death being this big production number, dying, the reality of just zipping the body bag closed is how it ends. So it's clearly done with a certain amount of irony, but it's a crazy scene, I know. So there's obviously no right or wrong answers, but I think you should be able to, not necessarily in the way that I think about it, but you should be able to characterize each one of them and really compare and contrast them with each other.